The College Football Treatment.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the next episode of the College Football Treatment. Today we'll be speaking to Anthony Treash, PFF College Football Analyst, also touch on NFL as well. But yeah, should be a good one. We're looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's a good episode just because I think this one's a bit more opinion based rather than sort of us firing questions. Obviously, we like using both methods of interviewing for this because it brings out like the factual side and the opinionated side, but this one's more of a look in from, like, I'd say Anthony's probably as much of a fan as he is a professional writer. As much as that's his profession, he's grown up being a fan of the sport, so it'll be nice to hear like an opinionated view.
Yeah, I think, like you just said as well, it's more conversational as well, so it's more just free flowing, and we can kind of learn about it in a different way than we did last time. Because last time was more facts and things that are being done, whereas this time it's just like an opinion of what someone else thinks about it. So
yeah.
So without further ado, I think we'll get straight into the conversation with Anthony.
The College Football Treatment.
Big welcome to Anthony for the second episode of the College Football Treatment. Thanks for coming on, Anthony. Really happy to have you.
Of course. Thank you guys for having me on.
Yeah, no worries, of course. So, I mean, going off our last episode, Anthony, we spoke to Isaac Vance, who is a NCAA committee member. He's a student athlete. And we kind of spoke to him about the importance of these committee meetings and how important it is for student athletes to be on these meetings. From your perspective, how important do you think it is for those student athletes to have their say in these meetings?
Yeah, I definitely think there's a role that they need to play, right? And definitely, I think Isaac can speak better on that, and he probably did. I'm assuming, since he is on the committee, than me. But looking from my perspective, I definitely think they need to have, some say and their voices heard on the matter, because at the end of the day, they are the product. And I think we are all starting to come around to, agreeing finally that this is a consumer product, right? I mean, we are all investing into watching these guys play college football, and they are putting every ounce of energy that they have into not only their schoolwork, but mostly this. I mean, this is where most of their time is going. It is a full-time job, essentially. So I definitely think they need to have their fair say in that. And, it's just kind of, at least for me, as an outsider looking in, it's just, I am very happy that they're finally getting that opportunity, just because it kind of seemed that after so many years that nobody kind of cared that they had an opinion. So I'm glad that we're starting to come around to that.
Yeah. And kind of going off what you've just said there, Anthony, the fact that, like you basically explained there, it's like a full-time job, isn't it? So has there been any kind of examples of when you've been reporting on it, obviously, because you're a college football analyst, have you kind of noticed any times where a player hasn't been performing to their potential because of the workload of obviously balancing a degree alongside a pretty much professional sport?
Yeah, I mean, I think there for a little bit, it was a little quiet on that front. And that's what kind of makes me nervous, because then you start to get some of those scandals where, players' grades are kind of brushed under the rug, right? But I do think that after some of this stuff is getting uncovered, and, it's not just in college football, it's in really every sport, where some of these star players maybe aren't going to class or something, or, some grades are tweaked, we're starting to see less of that and a little bit more disciplinary action for that. And, they're getting allotted time like they should for study hall and all that, depending on the program. So I do think that we are seeing, a little bit more disciplinary actions being taken. We have seen that in the the last few years, and, that's the way it should be. But I would say there for a little bit, it was very quiet, and that's not a good thing, because, you're not going to avoid these types of situations. And when, it's quiet, usually stuff's getting brushed under the rug, and that's something that you never want to have happen.
You touched on in your first answer about it being a consumer product. For the viewers that from where we are in the UK, where we don't have something to the scale of college football, just how big is it in the US?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty major. I mean, definitely NFL is still a king, but college football is right up there. I mean, compared to any other collegiate sport, I mean, college football is the upper echelon, right? I mean, Saturdays and the United States, it's pretty much dedicated to college football. I mean, the tailgating atmosphere, it's huge. And especially, you go down into the South where the SEC conference is in the southeastern part of the United States. I mean, that's their whole lives. That is their lifestyle. I mean, in Alabama, Tuscaloosa, it is the Alabama Crimson Tide football, right? That is what kind of they live around. And, we saw it there for a little bit when COVID hit and, they didn't have all of the fans coming to their city. I mean, these college towns, they were hurt. I mean, a lot of the local businesses, they weren't getting all the foot traffic that they normally would. So, it's a pretty significant deal. I mean, you see it everywhere you go, definitely more in the southeastern part of the United States, but it's all over the country. I mean, even here where I am in Cincinnati, Ohio, of course, with the Cincinnati Bearcats, they made it to the college football playoff this past year. I mean, every Saturday, it was a big event around here. It was hard. You had a game plan where you're going to be at certain times because you didn't want to run out of traffic. And so it's a pretty substantial deal. I mean, it's no different than I would say any other professional sport.
Yeah. So obviously you touched on the NFL still being the major player, but what sort of similarities and differences, one of the main ones, do you see between the two?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. And I think the college calendar is the biggest one just because there really is no off season. And I think in the NFL, definitely in the off season, you're doing a little bit more independent work, especially once you get up there and you are an established veteran, you can do more, independent stuff, and then closer to training camp in August and July, that's when you come back to the team. But in college football, I mean, it's a year-round adventure, and especially for college coaches. I mean, we heard, Kirby Smart, the Georgia head coach, national champion this past year, he said it too, is that he's nervous about the college calendar right now because he's seeing talented college coaches want to go to the NFL because they get to spend more time with their families working for the NFL teams as opposed to college football teams. So it's not just the players, it's the coaches too. And you can see why, for at least, for college example, why you're going around because you're still building up, right? You're still training your body. You still are learning how to play the game, and you want to learn it to the point that you can play professional level football. So, I mean, I don't think that's an issue, but I do think that the biggest difference there is just with coaches in particular. It's just because, especially with the transfer portal stuff now too, with the new rule that you don't have to sit out a year. I mean, transfer portal is madness. And now the little break that they had is gone. And even too, now you got to start recruiting transfers in season when that wasn't pretty typical. And so that's really the biggest thing there. And, of course too, you have less games in college football. That's a whole other, argument as well. So it's definitely the off season where the NFL, even players and coaches, they definitely get a little bit more of a breather. And it's understandable in some aspects, but also in college football and with these student athletes, they deserve a little bit more of a break too.
Do you think that like you just mentioned there, the scheduling, do you think that is the reason for the intense schedule? Do you think that is based towards trying to get them ready for the pro level rather than just, because obviously D1, a lot of them will be going to the NFL, so that they are preparing their bodies to go to the pro level, but for some of them, they might not be going to the NFL. So do you think that is the intense schedule is based towards just setting them up for the pro level?
Yeah, I think a lot of that has to do with it. And those are the circumstances where I understand it. But like you said too, I mean, not everybody's going to make it, right? I mean, still, you may get an opportunity, but it's kind of hard to sustain that opportunity into a long lifestyle, right? I mean, you may be in the league for a few years, but you're making, minimum contracts, and, next thing you know, it's been a few years and maybe you weren't able to, fully make it. And then you're looking for a new profession. And then it's kind of hard to get, kickstarted. If you were one of those players that left college early without a degree, then you have to go back and all of that. So, I mean, it is understandable. So I do think that's a big reason for that big intense schedule. It's just because, I mean, even with that intense schedule, these guys are still raw. I mean, you see it all the time. You could be, a 4-year starting quarterback. Then that 4th year, you're still learning. You're learning something new every day. So that's the biggest thing with that. And it's definitely the big driver is getting ready to develop players to NFL talent, because that's the biggest driving force, and it certainly helps in recruiting in that department.
Like you mentioned there about the raw talent, obviously this year, I don't know whether I'm right to assume it's not the greatest year for quarterback prospects, and not a lot of them look like they're going to go in the top 10. Maybe Kenny Pickett, maybe Malik Willis. How different are the two? in terms of quality? Obviously, you're tracking, I assume you watch a lot of the NFL, and obviously you cover college football. How big a difference is there between the quality in play?
Yeah, it's pretty staggering, I would say. And with this quarterback class in particular, it's just talking to some people. It's more of like a pick your poison type of group, because all of these quarterbacks have something different to offer, but at the same time, they all have something that's really worrisome with how they play the game. And I mentioned just quarterbacks being raw. Yeah, that's Malik Willis. The dude's talented for days, but he's just super raw, and he still has so much more to learn. And that's the case when you can see why some types of players, they need more time to develop. And now's his time, and I think someone's going to take a chance on his raw talent, as they should. I mean, it's unreal seeing him up close and personal with the way he can move and the way he can throw the ball. I mean, just the way he can, his decision making, that's the biggest thing, and some of the mechanics there too. He's got a lot to work on. And of course, Kenny Pickett, I mean, he's an example too. He's been a big player in that Pitt offense for the last 4 years, and it took him his last year to really make an impact and get on people's radars. But at the same time, while he had a good breakout, it's just you're holding onto the ball extremely long, and at the collegiate level, you can get away with that, right? I mean, he's getting rid of the ball on average about 3.2 seconds. At the NFL level, that's going to have to be about 0.7 of a second quicker, and that's a pretty drastic change in play style. So, and it's just trying to get ready for the NFL game. And it's interesting too to kind of see, and to kind of, I'm going off on a tangent now, but looking at the way kind of some of these college programs structure their schemes, because we're getting to the point where I think we're seeing less and just more of these, I call them college-y offenses, where they're kind of fake, they're gimmicky, and they just kind of help out the players, right? And they kind of prop them up a little bit, but it's not what you're going to see at the NFL. And that's when you see those learning curves. And those are the players like Sam Howell and Matt Corral, 2 other quarterback prospects that I think are going to have a tough time, because their offenses are just so different. So, I mean, it's definitely interesting. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to touch on Robert Griffin III, because I was doing some research last night on NFL players that have done well in the NFL and also obtained a degree and did well on the academic side. Do you sort of think, I know you touched on it earlier, that the D1 players should be pushed to sort of achieve qualifications as well as like trying to get into the NFL? Do you think that's something that the university should be focusing on more?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think so. And I think, there are, programs are doing a good job in that. And also too, with some of these underclassmen that do want to go to the NFL draft, I mean, they always get the report back on where they would projected to land in the NFL draft if they were to declare. What kind of talent does the NFL kind of see you? And that does give them a good idea of what kind of contract they're going to earn right away. And I think in most cases, really in every single case, even you look at some of these 5-star recruits, and you look at him athletically and you think there's a good chance this guy's going to be a 3-year player, meaning when he's eligible after his true junior year, he's gone to the NFL because he's that gifted of a player. But I think in every single case, it doesn't even matter. Even an Arch Manning, right? Eli Manning and Peyton Manning's nephew, who's, everybody's just freaking out over who's going to be in college here in a couple of years. His expectations should be, I'm going to be in college for 4 years unless, proven otherwise. And so I think everybody should be pushed down that path to get as close as you possibly can to obtaining that college degree. And then if you do decide to go to the NFL draft, then hey, at least you got most of your credits there. If you aren't quite done yet, then you can wrap it up within a year too. I think that's something that a lot of people in college football have done a good job of preaching, over the last decade or so. And I think that we're seeing more players accept that and understand that this is a smart way to, kind of, I would say design your career trajectory.
Something we spoke about with Isaac last episode as well is the new scheme, the NIL scheme, which is the name, image, likeness scheme, which allows the players to brand themselves and market themselves. And kind of, I think we touched on it last episode, we think that's like a really good addition, because it's not just teaching the players how to play football, it's teaching them that there is a life away from football if football doesn't work out. And it's kind of teaching them ways how they can make a living from branding themselves instead of just playing football.
Yeah, I mean, I was absolutely stoked to hear about this, because it's crazy to me that these players can't profit off of their name, image, and likeness, right?
Yeah.
Because like I said at the beginning when we started talking, this is a consumer product. I mean, people are, it's no different than any other business, right? People are going to watch them play football. They are spending money to go watch them play football. And honestly, the fans don't care what they're really doing in the classroom, right? That's their own personal thing. What they care about is, as fans, is what they do on the football field. It's no different if I go to a restaurant and I don't care what the waiter or waitress's hobbies are. I care how they kind of serve my food, and I'm going to give them a good tip if they do well, right? It's the same thing. So if you have these players, that are doing well, and people are fans of them, and they're helping their team win, and some local businesses want to support them, it should be allowed, and I'm happy that it is now allowed, and I'm very happy to see some of these programs to kind of design programs to help their student athletes find these NIL deals. So I mean, we saw Michigan do that within the last few weeks. And then, I actually just yesterday, I believe it was South Carolina, they're workshopping, starting up a jersey department. So when their player's jersey gets bought, the player gets some of those proceeds, like it should be. You don't have to go to these knockoff websites to get these fake jerseys to make it look like you have one of those. And so I think it's a great thing. And, the injury thing is talked about a lot. I mean, we saw, even, Mackenzie Milton, he's a college quarterback, for Florida State this past year. We saw him when he was at UCF. He was one of the biggest names when UCF was kind of in that national title run a few years ago. And then he got hurt. I mean, he had a gruesome knee injury, almost lost his leg. I mean, he probably would have made a good amount of money before that injury, just because of how he was performing with that program. And all of a sudden that's cut off there. And any chance that's gone. But he would still have something there from what was before. So I think with all of this time that these players are putting into, crafting themselves as student athletes and football players, that should be there, because they don't have an opportunity to go work another job, because then it's taking away from the consumer product that they're going out there and producing for everybody. So, it's a great thing. And, I'm just excited to see just kind of how it continues to develop, because I already think since they enacted it, I mean, it's going a very long way. And, just the education aspect of it, with the universities and partnering up with their players and student athletes. I mean, it's just an awesome thing to see. So I think that was a big thing that, college football and every college sport really needed to have happen.
I'm not sure if it's the same over in the States, but over here, maybe it's because it's hard to for people to pick a team over here that they support in American football, but you see a lot of people kind of supporting just individuals. So I think the NIL scheme is massive in terms of it gives people the opportunity to support an individual instead of just a team. And do you think that could kind of affect how the NFL teams draft these players as well, in terms of how they market themselves?
I think it could potentially. I don't think it's going to be as big of a thing. I could see a scenario where, and I've even heard rumors of this too, with just, various players, some are a little bit more worried about trying to find that NIL deal, while some players are just saying, that's on the back burner. If something comes up, I don't have to spend too much time with it, then that's great. But if not, I'm not going to go seek it out. So I think it could. But I do think it would be rare occurrences. And usually in most cases, if, a player is, putting off practice, putting off their team to go seek out these NIL deals, then there are probably other red flags elsewhere that kind of would have been, that marry with that. And I do think, kind of what you said with your first point, supporting individual players, I think that's a big thing too. And I think that's a good thing for college football, right? Yeah. Because I will say a lot of these college football fan bases can be, very aggressive, but I think if you kind of, diversify it and scatter it out, then I think it would be a better thing, and kind of also get these players too ready for the pro ranks. Those are the biggest things there. But yeah, I think it could impact some of these, players' draft statuses. But it would be rare. But like I said, in most cases, there's something else I think would have popped up that would have given off the same red flag.
You mentioned this is a couple of questions ago now, but you mentioned encouraging players to go back for their fourth year to complete their education. I just wanted to touch on Bryce Young, because obviously, or at least in my opinion, I think he probably would have got drafted, but possibly in the first round, should he have left Alabama this year. Do you think his motivation to go back is educational purpose, or do you think it is to try and win a college championship with Alabama?
Yeah, so in the case of Bryce Young, he wasn't eligible, so he had one more year left. And I think in his case, I'm perfectly, like, for me personally, I think I shouldn't speak on what he should do, but I mean, by all means, man, go into the NFL draft next year because you're probably going to be the number one overall pick, and you're going to make a lot of money doing that, right? And so I think he had every bit of opportunity, and it's a good point that you make that he would have been the first quarterback off the board this year, right? And he was still in his second year in the collegiate ranks. He wasn't eligible yet. And I do think that there is a little bit of an interesting debate there between some that, the Bryce Youngs of the world should be able to enter the NFL early. I kind of disagree with that just because, like I said, you in most cases, even the seniors and the super seniors, maybe they're the fifth year seniors, they're still learning the game of football. I mean, it's a significant jump going from college to pro. I think the 3-year system is good just because it helps teach you and also develops you. I mean, from a physical perspective to get ready for that game, because it's a completely different ballgame up there. I mean, the players are smarter, bigger, faster, stronger, all of that. So, in Bryce Young's case, I think and by all means, I think next year, forego your senior year, entering the NFL draft, because I mean, you're going to be a top pick and you're going to make a lot of money, being that top pick, especially at the quarterback position.
I mean, just to wrap up then, Anthony, what is your opinion on this then? Do you think that college players are treated justly in comparison to the kind of success of the sport, or do you think there is things that need to be changed? And if so, what things would you change?
Yeah, I think, 2 years ago, my answer would have been, I could have gone like an hour rant about how bad everything is right now. But like I've kind of been the theme, I would say, the last, few minutes here. I think we're college football and, all college sports are starting to go in the right direction. And so I think progress is being made. I still think that there are ways to go there. And I think everybody's still learning, especially with NIL being relatively new. And like I said, it's still developing to this day. It's different now than what it was a few months ago. And so I still think that there is progress to be made on that front. But I think just compared to where we were a few years ago, it's unbelievable. And I think this is a big game changer for, college athletics as a whole. I mean, just because too, I mean, you're looking, this isn't, a different sport, but you look at some college basketball players that, coming out of high school, they're projected to be top picks. Well, all of a sudden they're not even going to college. They're just going to the G League for a year, right? And they're just getting paid there. Now they can get paid in college. That is a huge thing there. So still think we have ways to go, but it's hard to complain about where we're at right now compared to a few years ago, because it's just so much different and so much better, for the student athletes. Because like I said, at the end of the day, this is a consumer product and they deserve to get their fair share.
Yeah. Perfect. I think that wraps it up.
Yeah, thank you.
The college football treatment.
Some wise words there from Anthony about the different parts of college football that maybe we didn't know prior to the episode. One thing I want to pick up on immediately after recording is the thing that he talks about, the short break for colleges. When you compare to the NFL, that they get about a 5 or 6 months break, colleges get 5 weeks maybe. I thought it was a big talking point.
Yeah, the main thing we have to take away from that, consider, is the fact that they are not just athletes, not just American football players, but they are students. And the NFL obviously get a massive break, and we're now in it obviously after the Super Bowl, and we've got to wait a long time for football to come back. But the fact that these players have to focus on their degrees as well, they don't really get much of a break. It's just pretty relentless. It does go a long way to show how much is expected of them in regards to the sport inside of their university career. But yeah, I feel like they should be given a bit more sort of like free time, spare time to focus on the degree outside of the sport.
Yeah, I know I'll keep banging the NIL drum as well, but that was something else he spoke about as well in the episode, which was obviously something we spoke to Isaac about. And Anthony kind of made it clear that it's a massive step in the right direction in comparison to what it was 2-3 years ago. Because obviously 2-3 years ago, they wouldn't have had that sort of benefit of been able to market themselves. But now, over those 2-3 years, they've came to this point, which makes it kind of exciting for what's next. Like, what more are they going to add that benefits these players?
He also touched on that I didn't really think about, that colleges are sort of teaching them individually how to use it. Like, it's almost become like a separate course to their education, which is a positive.
Yeah. Something I didn't really think as well was that, well, I thought that it would kind of affect their draft status and kind of like how teams looked at the. Obviously, if you've got an extremely popular player who's not one of the best in his class, they might pick them up just for the fact that they're extremely popular. Because it's like Anthony said, it's not just a sport; it's a business now.
Yeah,
and it's they're always thinking about how they can make money instead of just winning a game of sport. So like that's what I thought. But then obviously Anthony counteracted my previous thought by saying that it could come down to that, but I don't think it's going to be extreme enough that a player gets drafted just because of the way they market themselves.
Yeah. I mean, it was important to talk about as well, the difference in ability, because I think being sort of a focal point and writing about the NFL draft, he can make good comparisons, because when players are coming to the draft, you've got to compare their college career to their possible NFL career. I mean, he talked about, I think it was Kenny Pickett, who he said needs to be 0.7 of a second quicker, which I think is a long time in American football between getting sacked in college and the NFL. 0.7 of a second is a long time to hold onto the ball.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that there is obviously players deserve to dream, and obviously everyone that plays for a college team wants to play in the NFL. But sometimes when you obviously dig deep in terms of analysis, like you have to realize that a lot of the players aren't going to make it, and there is going to be that sort of, I don't know, stigma in the back of their head sort of thing that is going to maybe push them to focus a bit more on their academic status sort of thing. And that's another thing that he touched on as well, with the certain college athletes getting given really short-term contracts and then having to go back and finish their degree anyway. I feel like if they were to be pushed properly to, in some cases, put their course first sort of thing. Obviously, the colleges aren't going to want that, because the colleges want the best team and the most money, and obviously the players want to go into the draft and make it to the NFL. But if they are only going to get 3-4 year contracts, then they sometimes do have to be a bit more realistic and maybe put their academic status first and then focus on getting to the NFL after they've achieved their degree.
Yeah.
Just going back to what Dan said with the difference in quality. But obviously it's hard for us to kind of gauge that, because being from the UK, we don't get to see a lot of college football. It's on it's on BT Sport every Saturday, but then it's only 1 or 2 games a week, so we don't get to see like as much as they do. But I mean, just taking into consideration that Trey Lance, he was picked up by the 49ers this draft at pick 3, and he's not got a sniff in all season. And it's not as if like Jimmy Garoppolo is one of the best quarterbacks in pro football. So it's like there obviously is a difference in class and a difference in development, because like I just said, Trey Lance hasn't had a sniff, and he was one of the top quarterbacks in his class.
Sorry, go on, Charlie.
Anthony used the phrase raw, and I think it was quite a good way of putting it. So the players aren't necessarily ready, and it's like obviously we're talking about the fact that the quality and the expectations between college football and the NFL are so different. They sort of like players can sort of have to expect that, the fact that they're a long way off, like even in terms of training, not necessarily just the quality of what actually happens on the field. They're probably a way off a pro athlete sort of status anyway.
Yeah. And the fact that this year, like I mentioned to Anthony, that a lot of the quarterbacks in this year's class probably won't be starters for at least their first year. I think you're only looking at maybe 2 out of a class of about, what they're saying is 8 decent college quarterbacks. And
I think the problem this year is the the free agency market. Like, there's quite a lot of quarterbacks heading into free agency.
Yeah.
Well,
that is
not
true.
a lot, but I mean, you've got obviously Brady retired, Rodgers is thinking about retirement, Garoppolo's going into free agency, Roethlisberger retired. So already there, you've got two free teams that are, well, 4 teams, sorry, that are in need of a quarterback. So they might look to the draft, which, like you said, this year's draft class is really not that great for quarterbacks, but there's 4 teams that need a quarterback. So
yeah, well, it'll be telling whether teams look towards, well, how many teams are interested in, say, Garoppolo, say, like Jameis Winston, or they look towards the draft, because that will show whether their scouts think the quarterbacks are good enough this year to make a difference.
Another way I kind of explain for the UK audience, obviously, like the difference in class between NFL and college football, I'd kind of explain it like the Premier League and maybe League One, because League One is still professional football, and it's the same with college football. Even though it's not professional football, the quality still is good enough to be professional.
And the crowds
that's kind of the golfing class. Yeah,
that's a
but
good
obviously
comparison.
in the UK, obviously we don't have a sport that's that huge in terms of like college level sports, which is a shame. But
it doesn't even tickle the. Like, it doesn't get anywhere near it.
Yeah,
like, if you
literally
consider like university, obviously the biggest sport in this country is football, soccer. Like, university standard of that is just, it's rarely even any different to sort of Sunday league. Like,
I might look like a right idiot saying this. Wasn't there a university team that got into the Europa League or Champions League?
It was a Welsh uni.
Yeah,
Welsh
I think that's since I've been following soccer, which is for 20 years. That's the first time I've ever like even noticed a university team. Like,
but that's just because of how poor the standard is in Wales. I know it's a massive tangent, but it does just all sort of blend into the fact that from a UK perspective, there's nothing like the size of college sport here. It's hard to even comprehend until you've actually, like Anthony, been there firsthand. And that's why I think it was a really good insight from him, because he's one of few people that we will get to speak to that on a weekly basis, maybe even more than that, has been to different college games and actually firsthand been able to not just watch them, but sort of scrutinize them. Obviously, he is an analyst, so he gave us that in-depth sort of side to it.
I think for the benefit of us and the fans, it was good to get him on, because like we said after we recorded with him, he's a complete expert in the field. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you could tell from the first 5 minutes of talking to him.
Yeah, he knows exactly what he's talking about, and it's good to get that sort of insight from him, because that's what we're looking for. We're trying to kind of come to terms with this whole topic, like where our college players treated justly, and it's good to have people like him on, because he's watched it firsthand for God knows how many years, and he can see that it's developing into this sport that's almost on a pro level. And it's like he said about the NIL, it's a step in the right direction, and that's the same point with a lot of things that they're bringing into college sports. It's a step in the right direction.
Yeah. And on that note, I think we'll leave it there. So obviously, thank you to Anthony for joining us. And we'll see you next week for another episode.